Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. On today's show, we have Al Uszynski from Inside Lighting. Man, that was a good review of or preview of what's going to happen in 2021, Greg.
Of what might happen in 2021, Mike.
Might not. Who knows, right?
Good discussion, though, for sure. We went on.
This episode of the show, you're all waiting for it, is brought to you by Keystone Technologies. Go to KEYSTONETECH.com. I know you're there every day, Greg. I see you there on Keystone. What's happening?
Oh, I'm here right now. Backlit LED flat panels. All right, everybody talks flat panels. We know about flat. Everybody has a flat panel, right? The flat panels, they're not all treated the same. They aren't all the same. I'm learning that as I'm out in the field. I've been seeing certain cheap flat panels that were put in a few years ago started to yellow or change color or do things like that. What does Keystone have? They're doing a backlit panel. And why do they do backlights? Because they have all the individual LED chips in there that they can then cover and ensure that it doesn't yellow. So the fixture's not going to yellow. The lighting is not going to yellow. It's going to give you the color you want. It's going to give you the output you want. And you get to choose it. Selectable. 3 different wattages, 3 different colors, right on the fixture. Easy to put in. And they have it as a retrofit kit now, too.
Come on.
Panel retrofit
they have retrofit kit, too?
Oh, you got it, baby. You got it both.
You got to go to KEYSTONETECH.com. Keep it easy. Light made easy with Keystone. And, of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Where is it? There it is. Yep, NEILD.org. And that's it. We got Al Uszynski coming out on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Welcome back, Al Uszynski. How are you?
Great, guys. Good to see you.
Say hi to Greg Ehrich.
Greg, Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, you too, Al. Thanks a lot. Hey, we're going to talk about a number of things today, but one thing, I was on your website, inside.lighting, and I saw follow us. And on the bottom, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and then it had MySpace. I was like, okay, Al, you haven't updated anything, but then I saw what you did. Maybe Scott will do a better version, but you have a nice link sorry, I can't get
That's so crazy. I clicked the same thing. The guy with the hockey haircut and the mustache.
That's awesome.
That's so crazy. I hit the same button. I'm like, MySpace? What is this guy doing?
We try to be mostly serious on Inside Lighting, but once in a while, we like to throw a little bit of irreverence in there. So if you're examining the website close enough to see that very obscure MySpace reference at the bottom, we're going to reward you with a guy with a mullet, or as you Canadians say, a hockey haircut. And we get some good comments on some of those little things we sprinkle in there. So thanks for noticing.
The hockey haircut is still quite popular in Canada. There's guys that rock it all the time. Yeah.
Well, I got to think that the pandemic is causing people to get creative with hair as well. So it's probably like an ongoing trend that maybe we should address in the lighting industry as well.
So Inside Lighting, we talked to you before in the past. Give us a rundown. Why did you started it in 2016? Why? What was the main reason? What made you say I have to do this?
I was a factory guy for a lot of years, and one of the things that always drove me nuts was not being able to figure out who the major players are as far as agents are in some of the major U.S. and Canada marketplaces. So it's usually public information: who's the Acuity rep, who's the Hubble rep, the Cooper rep, et cetera. But it was a Easter egg hunt trying to go across the internet, figuring out who the different reps were in the different marketplaces. So that's what started it. And then in 2020, it was a year where I invested a lot more time, attention, and resources into it. And in addition to that directory of who the major players are, we provide news, information, resources, including, we have a section on UV lighting and jobs and other things. So we're just trying to be a resource for the lighting industry to help lighting people do their jobs better, quicker, and easier.
So is this your full-time job now?
Yeah, it's the most public-facing thing that I do with Inside Lighting, but I actually do some consulting for private clients. So that's really actually where I make more of my coin and my living. But from a standpoint of what's the most fun part of my job, it's this. And frankly, at some point, I expect it to be a large enough media situation where it will be full-time and hopefully involving more than just one person and some outsourced contractors that I use.
The consulting arm, the consulting side, what type of consulting do you provide I mean, it's a good advertisement. What kind of consulting do you provide for people?
Yeah, sure. So it's really I get involved with companies that have either a special project or a major long-term objective. So a lot of times companies use consultants because they want to get a third-party voice that's going to be honest with them and do a project that maybe they don't have the bandwidth or expertise to do. So that's where I get involved with my manufacturing background in sales and marketing and operational experience. I'm able to bring some unique things to the table, whether it's one of my past clients that had more of a residential focus and wanted to transition more to commercial, or a European company that wants to understand how they can immerse themselves and get more involved in the US or North American marketplace. And so, yeah, I get involved with market research and sales deployment opportunities and ways to help any usually manufacturer or any lighting related company assess the marketplace and figure out their spots where they can grow and leverage their strengths into a larger portion of the business for them.
Have you done any business with Chinese companies?
To this point, no, I have not.
Yeah, because the Get a Grip on Lighting part of the podcast has an interesting sort of beginning. Greg and I went to China in 2014 on like a junket, and it's a junket is what you would probably call it, Greg. Okay. Pretty much a junket.
I would say so. No real plan.
Yeah, just going over to factories and just going around and this sort of thing. And what we realized is that, listen, if you guys just did everything we told you to do, you guys would kill it. Like they're like basic things. Even they're trying to come to the United States with things in millimeters. It's like, buddy, that's not going to fly. Or milky white was the name of the fluorescent tube color. Right? I mean, or the LED TLED tube color and stuff. So we're like, you should just hire us, and then all your problems will be solved. But it didn't fly. We were totally shocked. Actually, it was unbelievable to us. But
when you say it didn't fly, the companies weren't interested in hiring you, or they did you ever get to a proposal stage, or did you ever provide some basic consulting? Or?
Yeah, we offer. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Oh, sorry. We put together a whole thing, like a whole company basically, and started reaching out to companies and met with a few or talked to a few, and it couldn't go. They didn't trust us, or I don't know what it was. Mike, what do you think? I mean, it was like a language thing. That was difficult.
I don't know if there's a consulting culture in China. So America has a really strong consulting culture that's not as strong in Canada. So Canadian companies are much less likely to hire consultants, actually. So the consulting culture in the States is very strong. I mean, that goes back to Drucker and a bunch of other things. And U.S. companies being a lot larger and being able to afford higher fees and stuff like that. But yeah, generally the consulting culture in the U.S. is a lot stronger than it would be in even Europe or in Asia. But in Asia, I think in China, it's a non-existent thing. Like to hire an outsider to tell you what to do is, perhaps culturally faux pas or something like that would be my takeaway, because it was so obvious. Remember that guy that took us out for dinner that didn't speak any English, and we went around and he took us everywhere, and we're like, for sure this guy's going to hire us. And no, he was just hoping that we would buy from him at the end of the day. And I don't know. It just was. I don't know. It's just not a culture of consultants there. So that's why I think it failed.
Yeah, a lot of those companies might not have the budget, like you said, or they just think that using Google Translate for a spec sheet works and then they end up having, milky white as a descriptor and not some of the other important parts that add up there. But
for sure.
Yeah. So diving into 2021, you have on your new site 11.5 predictions. At first it was 10.5. Now it's 11.5 predictions for 2021. Is that right?
Yeah. I started with 10.5, and then I realized that the first guy to send me predictions, I just left him out. So apologies to BIOS Lighting's Mark McClear. I left him off the list, so we threw him back in there, and so now we're up to 11.5. So just like you guys, we try to promise less and deliver more. So you get 11.5 predictions for the price of 10.5 on Inside Lighting. but we're real happy with the diversity that we had. We had people that were from manufacturing and distribution, as well as design. The DLC and the IES spoke up. So it was really a good diverse crowd and some interesting insights that were shared there. And we even had this one sometimes irreverent but always intelligent podcaster by the name of Michael that shared some insights as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
like
was
that.
gonna wear my mask to start the show.
For those listening to the podcast, Michael just put his mask over his eyes trying to hide. But Michael, you had some serious things to say about light pollution. What's up with your prediction for 2021?
Yeah, you know what? So we that nailed the association that I'm a part of and that Greg's a part of has signed a memorandum of understanding with the International Dark Sky Association to promote the 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting. And we've been working very hard on this issue over the last, going back to April, Greg. We've been working on the deal. We inked it in November, I think. And
Yeah.
so we spent a lot of time working on it and just researching it. And when you look retroactively just at what my company has done as a small Canadian lighting distributor and contractor, we've created we've gone from a situation where people were unaware, becoming aware of dark sky issues, say in 2008 to 2009. It started to gain some traction. I have some old product in my warehouse, CFL wall packs that are full cutoff that have a dark sky logo on the side and stuff like that, just from projects that didn't, had an extra fixture in that. We've had it on the shelf back there for years. And then it was completely obliterated by lumens per watt. The conversation totally changed. And that problem went into the back burner, not even the back burner, just unrecognizable. Nobody even cared about it. There was no acknowledgement of it, but the science didn't stop, and the people studying it didn't stop studying it. And the lack, the I don't know what the right way to put it is, but the light pollution is pollution. It's not a simile. Okay, that's not a simile to make people understand it better. Light pollution is pollution, and it causes all manner of problems for living things. And all living things are connected. So if you cause problems, like for example, they're talking this one scientist we interviewed last year, which is a couple of weeks ago now, but Dr. Sibylle Schroer is her name, in Germany. She studies how fish, small little fish, eat the little tiny slime that's on rocks on the shore, and how light pollution causes those fish to leave that area, killing that little slimy stuff and having them swim out deeper in the water and being preyed upon more by larger fish. And so you may think, well, who cares about that, right? I don't care. The fish can swim over there, right? The birds can fly over here. But these sort of things have impacts that slowly creep up on us over time. The second thing is that glare and light trespass is a massive issue in my neighborhood, and sure, many other people's neighborhoods, where you have LED lights that are flickering on and off every, 60 times a second, because they're from 2017 or whatever, and they're pointed right, the lights going right into people's bedroom windows, and this is causing problems. And the whole thing was paid for by rate-based incentive programs. And so the industry has kind of hidden from this issue, probably starting, I'm giving you a long answer here, Al, but starting in 2017, they've hidden from the issue. And now we saw the deal between the IES and the IDA come out with the 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting. And, there's going to need to be some reflection. And I started the shows that we did on Dark Sky with Get a Grip on Lighting and Jane Slade and that with the song Don't Look Back in Anger by Oasis, because it's time to just say we messed up. We screwed up as an industry. We got it wrong. And have the courage of our convictions to say that. And just say, now it's time to fix it. Why should we do this, Al? Well, you can go through all other reasons about how it's right and we need to be honest and all those other kind of things that people say, but because it's going to start another lighting boom, the dark sky lighting boom. And that's where this industry needs to go. And the final point, and I'll let Greg get back to everybody else's predictions on this, on the list. But the final point is that, I lost my final point now. What was it? The final point is that the industry can solve a legitimate environmental problem. It's the only industry capable of doing that right now. Every other environmental problem we have is largely unsolvable. Can't fix it. We're kind of stuck with coal and gas and all, electricity, although there's certain jurisdictions that are clean and other ones that aren't. But those are long-term infrastructure, billions of dollars of infrastructure investments and science we don't have yet. We can solve this problem right now, Uszynski.
That's good insight, strong comments, and I think when we look at just kind of the so what part of that is, so what do we do as lighting distributors, as lighting manufacturers, lighting designers, and lighting professionals to help inspire that change, Michael? What do we do in 2021 if we're talking about predictions? How can we affect that change as responsible lighting people?
Well, I can tell you what the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors is going to do. Okay.
Yeah.
Not what we can do conceptually, but what we're actually going to do. And the first step is we are going to create an education program in our LS Evolve series, which will be approved by the International Dark Sky Association. Okay. And we'll set out not ethically or morally, there will be a little bit of that in there, but most of it will be what type of products are dark sky approved? What type of applications should they be used in? How do you install them? How do you commission them? How should they be controlled? How do you sell them? That's the first part. That's the first part of our strategy. And so that's what we're going to do. And we're going to train. So we're going to start, IDA's working from the top, talking to politicians and trying to get ordinances and these types of things. And we're going to work from the bottom so that when the ordinances come out, there's people that know how to deliver that at the other end. And so that's what Nailed is going to do. And we're also, should we just say it, Greg?
Well, you are doing one podcast a month for Getting Grip on Lighting.
That's right.
Dark Sky focused.
That's Dark Sky. There's going to be one podcast coming out that's Dark Sky focused. There's going to be another hot blast between Greg and I on Lighthead about the dark sky and the issues surrounding it. So we're going to be putting out a lot of media and education in order to further those goals for the industry. So yeah,
and more.
More we got other things that we're not ready to release yet, but that are even bigger than that. So we got a lot cooking.
That's exciting. That's good. And are those wall packs, those CFL wall packs you mentioned, are they part of your solution? Or are they gonna...
I got 2 of them out there on the dollar bin if you want them.
Al, he needs to get rid of them, so we got to find a way. That's what all this is about.
Perfect. Excess inventory. Let's do it.
So the other stuff you've got going. So that's one big one that Mike brought up. He didn't even tell me he was doing it. I had to read it myself and say, "Oh, look at you, big shot." Going in the order here a little bit, you said in the post-COVID-19 era, I believe workspace environments will evolve to be more comparable to hospitality gathering spaces. Consequently, I see an explosion of dynamic color tuning systems being specified by lighting designers. What are your thoughts on that, Al? Mike, how do we want to handle that?
Yeah, I'll comment first. So this was a comment from Stephen Rosen, who's a fellow of the IALD, very well respected lighting designer out of Boston. And so as we comment on any of these things, these comments belong to the individual that stated it. And so now we're just kind of giving our own personal spins on it. So I'm sure Stephen would elaborate a lot differently than I'm about to. But it actually causes us to think about he mentions the work environment. And if you've been to like a Courtyard by Marriott 5 years ago and compared to what the lobby looks like today, or even like an Outback Steakhouse or a lot of these chain restaurant steakhouses where you used to have individual 4 tops and 6 tops, and now you walk in and you can sit with 16 different people. And like when I hear Stephen's comments, I think about that more collaborative workspace, a more dynamic workspace that's not someone with a desk drawer full of papers and personal belongings and a file cabinet with their other stuff in it. It's going to be like maybe you don't have an assigned desk, and there's already some workspaces that are like that, but I feel like that's what part of this prediction is. And the whole commercial office sector is another thing, because I don't know if there's a lot of short-term growth in that sector right now, given all the challenges that we're having with pandemic-related construction and workspaces and people working remotely. But as we look at people coming into the office, and rather than going to their assigned desk, it might be that you just go to the first open desk and you plop your laptop up there and you do your things from there, and you have more collaborative spaces. And he mentioned dynamic lighting, so that could add splashes of color and things like that as barriers to entry for doing dynamic lighting is much less than it used to be. You don't have to have super expensive 5-6 figure control systems to provide color changing and sophisticated control aspects to that. So that's my 2 cents on that. But open to hear what you guys think about what Steven said about dynamic lighting and the new office of the future.
Yeah, so I'll take the new office of the future. I had a meeting this morning with my sales staff, and one of them was talking about a customer of theirs that's in a downtown tower in Minneapolis, and they have 5 floors of this skyscraper building, and that's where all their office is. They just got notice saying, after these last 9 months, they realized they didn't need all that space. So now they're renegotiating their lease, going down to 2 floors and doing very similar to what you're saying in terms of shared workspaces. So there's good and bad in that. Good is that there might be opportunity from the lighting standpoint where now you got to redesign the space. So you need new light fixtures to redesign it, hopefully. And the bad is it's a lot less space to redesign.
I think my take on it is that I think that's largely a lighting designer's issue. I think that for distributors, I think they're going to continue largely selling what they sell, and then they'll assign a person in their office that's in charge of color tuning and stuff like that, and that will because we work largely in existing spaces with MRO, and then projects based on energy efficiency and on cost savings, right? So I don't see a massive change to that for the distributor side of it or the contractor side of it. But I think lighting designers, absolutely, new jobs, new construction, there's going to be tons of color tuning there for sure. Yeah.
Good. On to the next one. We should reference, that's a good point, Al. This is Craig Kassler of Cooper.
Yeah, he's the president of Cooper Lighting Solutions.
All right. He said it's going to be slow market recovery and 40% of global. I'm just trying to sum it up here. Al, do you have a good summary of it? Maybe a better year ago.
Yeah, I think for the Craig's comments, and it's about a paragraph. So the 2 or 3 points I take out of it is he expects the market recovery from 2019 levels to be a slow recovery, taking possibly until 2023 or later to get back to 2019 levels. So that's a 3-4 year recovery. And then he also believes the rebound from COVID-19 will offer growth and market share opportunities for manufacturers who can commercialize and scale. So one of the things you look at there is, okay, so 2019, before Cooper Lighting Solutions was purchased by Signify, they were about a $1.6 billion business unit. Now their numbers are just kind of combined into Signify, so it's hard to pull out exactly what Craig's portion of it that he oversees is. But nonetheless, when you think about it taking 3-4 years, that's kind of consistent with what a lot of companies saw back in the 2008-2009 Great Recession, of it taking a while. But what I would add to that is that obviously a company like Cooper Lighting Solutions, it's diversified throughout the different types of projects and the different types of products that it offers. So you have, a very popular residential downlight brand like Halo. I don't know this, but I'm imagining that because residential sales at Home Depot and other resi-focused stores are doing pretty well amidst this pandemic challenge. Home Depot sales were up 23% and 24% the last 2 quarters. That type of product category is doing okay. But then you have some of the more commercial and industrial focused brands and some of the more complex commercial control systems and things like that, which might have taken a large step back in 2020, and that will continue. The other part of that context that I would add to that is that when you look at Signify, this large global behemoth, that's formerly known as Philips in our industry and has spun off, it's had like 7 consecutive years of negative revenue growth, meaning the revenues get smaller and smaller and smaller each of 7 years in a row. So when you have that kind of trajectory because of the way that the lighting industry has changed and Signify has gone about its intelligent moves to get leaner and then refocus, it might also, that kind of momentum might also take a little bit while to dig. But when you look at some of the smaller players, there's companies that are focused on some good vertical markets, whether it's resi or retrofits or energy sales or even healthcare or some other niches. When you're small and nimble, you might have an opportunity to grow. And there's others that aren't tied to a distribution chain where they can't be upsetting a lighting distributor or an electrical distributor, and they can find ways to sell direct and go around that. I know you guys don't want to hear that, but there's smaller companies that aren't as tied into the traditional channels, that they can maybe be a little bit more creative or disruptive, depending on how we want to label it, that can allow them to grow in different directions. So just because Cooper Lighting Solutions and Signify are projecting slower growth, in my opinion, doesn't mean that that's kind of a 3 to 4 year turn for the entire industry. I think there's pockets that can recover quicker, and maybe some that won't recover, and maybe some that'll take longer than what Kassler suggested.
I think Craig's talking about a very diversified business, right? So he's looking at a very big portfolio of different things that he's got going on, and he's prognosticating because he's got a big portfolio. And I think within those different segments, like you mentioned, Home Depot being up, and there's different areas that are going to grow. And but I think overall he's probably right. Looking at the entire industry, hopefully he's wrong, but he wants to be wrong. I'm sure he'd love to defy expectations, but he's looking at a massive company with diversified portfolio. So he's making his prognostication, and I think he's right. Mark McClear, Greg.
Yeah. So sum that one up. He is looking. That's from BIOS Lighting. He is saying that human-centric lighting will have some recommended practices, or there'll be more defined on what it is. And Michael and I have been talking about that for years. Is we can't sell it until you can define it, until you can make sense out of it. And so we need that to sell it. Is that really going to happen?
Well, I think the jury's out, right? And I think I love optimistic opinions more than I like pessimistic opinions. But the opinions I appreciate most are the realistic ones. So do I think there's realistically going to be widespread adoption of human-centric lighting principles among the design and user crowd, as well as just a general stakeholders in lighting? I don't think there's going to be general widespread adoption, but I think, this is not a new topic. This has been 10 plus years in the making of it really bubbling up to lots of conversations like this. So I think the adoption will continue. I think the well building standard is going to help drive that type of adoption, just like we were talking earlier about dark sky stuff. I think bringing that awareness up, but not just awareness, but forcing practices that comply with well building standards, as well as some of the barriers to entry with costs of doing not just color tuning. This is more, using the right spectra of light depending on time of day for some of the occupants. And the approach that BIOS is taking is real interesting. Just like if you have a PC, you might have an Intel chip and a sticker on your laptop that says Intel inside. That's what BIOS, one of their major paths to market, is to be a kind of an ingredient marketing, where they're a component of 30 plus manufacturers of human-centric lighting. So I think it's a smart approach to get kind of their message out, not just on a BIOS platform, but by having 30 influential manufacturing partners that span the gamut from high-end specification to more everyday commercial type fixtures that can help spread that word as well. So I think that's a huge growth area over the next 5 to 10 years, and we'll see the ball move forward in 2021.
Yeah, we're ready for it, Mike. You got that knife sharpened.
Swing through the trees, baby. Well, the problem with that standards are what is needed, but I don't think they have the information yet to make standards. Right. So it's like you'd be making standards and then having to change them, and that's what we've gone through with energy efficiency, and it causes a lot of problems because you have legacy technology that no longer conforms to the standards, and it was only installed 2 or 3 years ago. And now you remember that healthy system we told you had? Hey, it's not so healthy, actually. Time to change it out again. And I think it's fun to say that with dark sky when you're looking at it, everything is wrong and we know exactly what to do. But when something comes up like that, we think it's the best, we should write a standard, and then we got to change that standard and change that standard. I think you lose the public's faith in the industry. And then it becomes more like snake oil again. This is going to solve your seasonal affective disorder. Yeah, that's right. Get that full spectrum going. People kind of like, it's what's the scam today? You know what I mean? You can get that. So we got to have the scientists come out and say, this is for sure for all people in all walks of life, no matter what the color of their skin is, no matter where their ethnic region they hail from, because it's kind of turning out that people that are from northern regions of the world actually have different needs than people from more places closer to the equator, which would be another prediction, is that actually human-centric lighting is more diverse than one solution. And we don't want to be making a European-centric lighting now, do we, Al? Right? And I think that dovetails perfectly into Edward Bartholomew's point, which was that the lighting profession will be transformed by the social changes that are taking place in our society. I predict that lighting, along with architecture and design professions, will be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive, reflecting the communities that it serves. And that a more diverse profession will generate more creative and responsive lighting solutions. I don't know. What do you think, Al?
Well, Edward's been a great proponent of speaking out about how to help the lighting industry and the design profession become better at being more inclusive and equality type initiatives. So, from that perspective, I would frame it in a way where, again, it's not going to all move forward and change miraculously in 2021. If you look historically speaking, it takes a generation for there to be a real huge step forward in acceptance and racial equality and those types of tolerance measures. But I think the events of the last 6 to 10 months have shown us that it's accelerated that conversation where now, the three of us talking here, we're three white Caucasians that were born in North America, and it's an unearned privilege. But when you look at people who don't necessarily have that same diversification or makeup as far as being a minority, those people have a tougher road to hoe. I've never had to drive through a neighborhood and be worried about getting pulled over for no reason, whereas that's a reality for a lot of people in this country. So when you bring that down to the industry, Edward's in the design field, and when you look at architectural lighting design, that could be considered a subset of architecture. And even the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, I think the last time I saw their membership data, it's like 80+% of architects are male, and you look at I believe less than 10% are African American. So there's, in the design profession, there tends to be a lack of diversity. So what can we do? If you think about hiring practices, if you're hiring people out of school, maybe we in our rotation of 8 to 10 colleges that these large companies go to, maybe they put a historically black college on that interview agenda to make sure that they're interviewing the cream of the crop at those universities and colleges to bring some of those people in, and to have some sort of programs within various manufacturers and distributors, et cetera, where you create a path of advancement and an opportunity for everyone to hop onto those equally. And I think also some of the social things that have happened over the last year is going to cause a lot of people who in the past, they were maybe their default when they saw something that was wrong, they would just be quiet and not kind of raise a stir about it and just forget it happened. I think some people, not all people, but some people are more prone to speak up when they see something wrong rather than just keep their mouth shut. So I do think we're going to see that this is more of a movement than a movement. It will take time, but I do think we'll see some advances, and I'm hopeful that will be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast is the place to dive deep into these kinds of issues. It's just not the place for it. But what I would say is this, is that, first of all, change is not necessarily good. So the word change has somehow been tacked on to meaning that change is good. And change is not always good. Progress, meaning change for the better, is good. But change for the sake of change is not necessarily good. And the other thing I would add to that is every social intervention that we do, everything we do socially to intervene becomes the next problem. And that's the law of social science, is that anything you do to intervene and try to predict the future or try to create change creates all manner of unintended consequences that you could not predict. And you may achieve whatever numbers that you wish to achieve, like 50-50 women and men Alaskan crab fishermen, if that's what you want, crab fisher people, if that's what you're after, or 50-50 female and men loggers, if that's what you're after, then you could probably do that if you want. But the reality is every social intervention we take is always becomes the next problem to solve. So change needs to be brought back to being a benign term. And we got to look at things that actually help people as opposed to platitudes, which a lot of this stuff to me strikes me as when I hear it, platitude. reading the statements on people's websites about diversity. So you wrote something on paper, or you wrote something on the internet. Who cares, buddy? What is the actual outcome? How do you measure it? When do you know that you've gotten there? But there's all manner of problems involved in that. And so, even though I probably could unpack it intelligently, I'm not going to, because it's not the place to do it. But, I think that there, in a sense, there is a zeitgeist in this direction, and I think it needs to be tracked and followed intelligently. Greg, you have any thoughts?
I don't. I think you guys handled that one pretty well. I want to get on to the next couple here. UVC lighting. You had two comments. You had Rudy Jadwet, who was on the negative side a little bit, saying it's going to not increase. The sales of UVC and germicidal lighting are not going to increase because of misleading claims by manufacturers and regulatory issues, things like that. And then you had Joseph Melchors from Cooper, who said,
Joe Melchor is the VP of sales for Cooper. Yep.
And it's going to continue to gain traction. So what's going to happen? Al, what is your opinion on UVC and germicidal lighting? Is it, and I asked this question a couple times on recent podcasts, is it a fad, or is it something that's here to stay? Is it going to, where are we at with it?
Well, I think it's possible for both Ruby and for Joe to be right, because Ruby said that it's not going to grow substantially, and Joe said that we're going to see traction. So I think there's going to be, as people return to work or to school or these other public buildings, there's going to be a demand by the occupants of the buildings that they don't want to return unless they have some sort of assurance that it's a healthy building. And that's going to come down to sanitizing and other things that are outside of lighting, but UVC will be part of that discussion. And I think one thing is I've watched the UVC and I pay close attention to it. A lot of those portable, movable fixtures that were going into hotel rooms and subway cars, that was an immediate response when things were on lockdown and people were really at high alert status on this very contagious pandemic situation. And as we look at settling in now, and we kind of understand where how this is transferred from one to another, and we have vaccines on the way, and I think it's going to be more of a permanently installed solution. I think we're going to see UVC disinfection or healthy lighting, where it's something that looks like there's companies now that have these types of things where it looks like a fire alarm detector on the wall that air passes through, and there's a UVC chamber inside that disinfects it, or there's actual lighting that's at a certain bandwidth that disinfects light, or that disinfects spaces. So I think the medium to long term is to see installations of permanently installed fixtures and fewer of those. And one example of this is Acuity Lighting, or Acuity Brands Lighting, when they've announced 3 partnerships in 2020, one with Ushio, one with Puro, with the violence defense by proxy, and then the third one was something called UV Angel. And UV Angel is a light disinfection thing that pops into a ceiling panel and does those types of things. So you look at where we're headed, I think there's going to be an expansion into parallel areas where these things might not be light fixtures illuminating spaces, but there's UV light inside that helps disinfect spaces. But I think to Ruby's point, it's kind of a wild west of safety and understanding and proper application of it, where you have a building owner nearby here that runs a major retail center, and they were asking me about light UV disinfection to put in the elevators and other spaces, and the stuff that was being sold to them was crap, but they didn't know it was crap. It's UVC, and it has lots of promises on a spec sheet, and let's go and spend lots of money on that, and then you buy something that just doesn't do the job, or it's unsafe or something there. So I think there's work in play to have some of this regulated, but I do think there's going to grow. But to Ruby's point, it's going to be measured until there's some sort of standard and way to police the enforcement and application of it.
I'm going to break it up. I think it needs to be broken up. I think it needs to be broken up into surface disinfection and upper air disinfection. Okay? So surface disinfection in places where that humans occupy is largely unproven. Nobody knows if it works. They know they have science that proves that it does things or whatever, this sort of thing. So you have, I think I think both of their points point directly to surface disinfection using UVC. Upper air disinfection is proven and should be deployed in airports and train stations and all these kinds of places. And it should also be deployed with hygiene theater. And what I mean by that is, like, when people were deploying these roll around stations and the wands, there was a theatrical element to this. We are pushing this magic cart of COVID killer into the train. Look at us. And now we're running away from it, plugging it in, and then we're going to run back in and plug it out. And after 20 minutes, all the COVID is gone, man. It's all gone. I promise you. It's all gone. We blasted it. We radiated it. It's gone. Yeah. But there's a sense in which that was a form of theater. It was a theatrical production that people did. But I think we need to take that seriously, because if the industry can give people reassurance, real reassurance, that the air in that space is being disinfected by this light fixture, and that bathroom door in the airport is locked for 30 seconds, while the reverse occupancy sensor turns on the surface disinfection in that toilet and literally burns away all the bacteria that's in that area. Because it's application by application, right? You have to look at it. Like toilets in airports, I'd love it if there was a surface disinfection light in those things. Like, really, come on your above urinals, you walk away, the thing, you're never going to be exposed or radiated for any significant amount of time. If you happen to walk in, the sensor clicks off or whatever. We can do that really effectively in certain applications, but we need to be theatrical about it. We need to show the world that we are cleaning the air. We are cleaning the surfaces. We are doing these things. When you see that green light, air is being purified right now. And people think I'm joking about this, but I'm 100% serious. If we can give people some assurance that something is being done. Because people are, listen, Al, I don't care about COVID-19, okay? I'm not afraid of it at all. I have no concern whatsoever. I've had COVID-19. My parents have had COVID-19 twice, and they're in their 76 and 75, okay? Twice they've had it, all right? Toronto's like a COVID-19 mixer. Anyway, my point being this, is that some people in our society are legitimately afraid of this, of all viruses, and their germophobic instincts have been made substantially worse, exponentially worse, in fact. Where they don't want to get on a plane, they don't want to get on a bus, they don't want to get on a train. We need to be theatrical about this, as well as practical. So we need solutions that work, but when they do work, we need to shine them and show them off to the world that this is working, so that people can then move back into these spaces. And that's my take on it. And I think if we take seriously the theater, and I don't know if that's the right term, Greg, Ehrich, hygiene theater, but we need whatever term we want, because people don't like it because they think we're pretending. But I don't know what other term to use, but we need to take that seriously. Whatever we're going to call that, there's got to be a better word for it. But if we could do that and show people that something's being done, then you would see an increase in people's willingness to go back to the office, to go to the airport or wherever else they want to go. There's my take.
All right. So we'll see. We'll keep on that as we go. Yeah, Tim Lecitra,
man.
IES. I said it right. Lecitra from the IES, just saying everything's going to connect more as an industry. Is that about the gist of it?
Well, he also cites that 2020 taught us the ways we can collaborate without being in person, and that we can learn remotely and more effectively, and still have these types of partnerships without necessarily being face to face. Or some of the other comments that I believe Tim was trying to express. So I think that's true, and I think just taking a step back, I think Tim may have wrote that with the IES Lighting Library, which is this great online resource of information that's available through the IES now. But there's also, your bigger picture where, just like you think of, I remember when I was a kid, I used to call my dad at the office, not a lot. And he didn't have a sophisticated, phone system at work. And, when I asked for my dad, they were like, he's in a meeting. I'm like, all right, I'll just call him later. But I used to think my dad was really important because dad was in a meeting. Right. And then I became like part of the business world. And I learned that a lot of these meetings, they're not important. It's just a time waste and a time suck. And so I think what we've definitely learned throughout the year is that, first of all, we don't have to travel 20 miles or 200 or 2,000 miles to go to every single meeting that we're invited to. We can do it more effectively and save a ton of time by doing it remotely. We don't have to, for people that collect CEUs and other training. If if you add a new manufacturer to your line card and you have to get trained, it's always more effective to see, touch, and feel the samples and shake the person's hand who's doing the training. But in the absence of that, you can have some effective online training if the online training is designed well and implemented well, because there's a lot of online training that stinks. And then when you think about the collaboration, I think it's also going to allow us to cover more ground. Now, if I'm a distributor, you typically operate within your local trading area. You don't go, you don't travel 1,000 miles typically for a sales call, so you drive locally. But if you have a larger territory or a larger bandwidth to travel, like when I look at the U.S. market, there's two small markets that I always like to compare. One of them is northern New England, the 3 states of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. The other one is the entire state of Oklahoma. They're about the same population. They're about the same market size as far as buying power for commercial lighting products. But one is much easier to cover than the other. One is much more difficult, therefore making it more costly. And the one that's easier to cover is Oklahoma. You have Oklahoma City, and then right up I-44, you have Tulsa. Those are the 2 largest cities in Oklahoma. And if you cover those 2 markets, you've captured, 75% or more of the Oklahoma market. But for the similar size market in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, you got to go to Portland, Maine, Nashua, New Hampshire, Rutland, Vermont, Burlington, Vermont, and drive all over creation through these rural areas to cover the same ground. But now what 2020 has shown us is that not only is it feasible and possible to cover that, but customers are more accepting to it. And they actually might appreciate it more to be called on remotely rather than in person. I think you still got to have those in-person job meetings. If you're going through a punch list on a job site, you got to visit the job site. But there's a lot of stuff that can be done remotely, and that's my take on it. Now, I'm interested in your perspectives, guys, because both of you are in the distribution business and have more of a local focus than a widespread multi-province or state focus. So, what have you seen to be the most effective parts of this remote interaction with your vendors and your customers, and what lessons can we take moving forward from your perspective?
I'll go first. So as a distributor here, and a majority of my business is in the Minneapolis market, which is pretty drivable and easy to get around and do all that. Honestly, not a lot has changed from my standpoint, where I'm still able to go to customers. I'm still going into facilities every single day. I'm still meeting with people just about every day. I have a mask on, but I'm still doing that all the time. So some businesses are closed or they might not be as available. But for the most part, that part hasn't changed. I have done a couple Zoom meetings, which I've never done in the past, sales calls, proposals, and I actually liked the one I did. It was kind of nice in a way. It seemed like it was more engaged and more focused than it would have been in person, oddly enough. Because, in person, there's all the distractions when they're on the Zoom. They have the headset on, they're focused on their screen. Nothing else is around them distracting them. And it's an allocated time. I found that to work out well. So as a whole, though, not a lot of my business has changed because of it, other than some people aren't at their office.
Yeah, you still got to count the lights.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They still want you to count the lights and make recommendations. So you still got to go to their site. For me, we started this. When did we go video, Greg? 2017, 2018, something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
As soon as we went video, I got all my vendors and like my accountant and everybody just to do Google Hangouts. Google Meet, but to do Google Hangouts. And our accountant, Joanne, Greg, was so nervous to do a Google Hangouts video call. I know she doesn't listen to the show, but I remember this when I first hired her as like part-time CFO for me. When I said we're going to do a Google Meet, and said because she I have to drive to your office, that's 45 minutes. I got to bill you for this. I said no, we're just going to do a Google Meet and screen share it. It's like, what do you mean? You're going to see me on the internet? I'm like, yeah, we're gonna see each other in a video call. She's like, I don't know about that. Like that's weird, and it's not weird. It's great. It's so much easier, right? And so it took 2 or 3 phone calls and a couple of them. So why don't you just click that little button there in the invite? Because you have a Gmail. I just click it. Yeah, see, now you can see me. See? Yeah. And she's like, this is not weird. I'm like, no, it's not weird. Right? And she's like, next thing you know, now years later, now she's like, yeah, all my clients are at Google Meet now. before COVID. This is before COVID. So once you're introduced to this technology and you understand how it works and it's not weird, it's amazing, okay? It's such a wonderful advancement. It's like Star Trek, Al. Remember Star Trek? We got the commander coming in talking to, Picard on the screen. It's amazing. And so there's nothing bad about all the electronic communication and video calls, Zoom, Meets, Hangout, whatever you want to call it. But, I think that all in all, we got to be able to go back and meet people again. And there's a combination there. And we've improved and gotten better through this. But I think we need to be in person too. And I think I echo your points with that. It's wonderful technology, but it's not the same. And it can be utilized in certain instances to achieve something. But it's not always great.
So to Mike's point of, or to your point about being online and the capabilities of all that, what about trade shows? We've talked about that in the past, and that's where a lot of us have met in the past. We used to see each other, be in person. Are they coming back? What are we going to do about trade shows?
Well, I hope to God they're coming back. It's one of the highlights of my year in lighting is to reconnect with a lot of the people, but make new connections and see what's new and see the trends and attend the conferences and seminars. When we look at that, a lot of the trade shows and conferences for the first half of 2021 have been pushed back to the second half of 2021. So now you have pretty much all the major trade shows and conferences happening in the second half of the year. In fact, in August, September, October, in a 12-week span, we have like 7 or 8 major national things happening, starting with the IAS annual conference in the first week of August, and then hitting Legication, Strategies in Light, also in August, and then eventually it's the IAS Street and Area Light Conference, and then Light Fair in October. So it's a long stretch there. And 2 of those big events, the Legication and Light Fair, are happening in New York City in August and October, respectively. So as we're talking right now, it's January of 2021. For about a month, New York City hasn't allowed indoor dining. So even a restaurant with 30 seats, never mind 100 or 200 seats, any restaurant of any size, no indoor dining is allowed right now. So somehow in 7 months, which is when Legication is going to take place in about 7 months from now, are we going to be to the point where we can fill up the Hilton on 6th Avenue with hundreds of lighting people converging upon this trade show and conference? I sure hope so. And I think it's possible and possibly even probable, but we're going to know in the next 90 days whether this seems feasible. So you look at the kind of the toll gates that need to happen. First of all, we need to get the vaccine not just distributed, but implemented. And it's not me being trying to be like a Dr. Fauci, but I don't expect any state or local ordinances to allow a large gathering unless there's a certain amount of the population that's vaccinated or some sort of herd immunity that the public health officials say exists. So if we don't get to that level of 1 million people per day in the U.S. Soon, it might not be feasible to have a huge conference 7 months from now. Now, if we do get there, then we're going to start to see things reopen, like as restaurants. And then speaking of New York, the Broadway shows, the earliest they can reopen is June. That doesn't mean they're going to, but that's the earliest that they can reopen. And, depending on ticket sales and practices and things like that, it might be later for them. But can you fill a theater with hundreds of people right now? No. Can you do that in June? Possibly. But will that be pushed out? So I think we'll see lots of those leading indicators show us whether these things will actually happen or not. As we talk in January right now, I think it's possible. But I think it all comes down to the public health officials saying how much of the vaccine's been implemented and whether or not they can green light something like this, a gathering of this type or not.
Yeah, I think what I notice most is like the new connection loss. Like we were meeting so many different people, wonderful people that you're just never going to meet online. I mean, we meet new scientists on the show and stuff like that, but we got to have a beer someday. We got to get together, this kind of stuff. And it's like, that's the problem. My wondering is how are they going to display this mark of the beast? That's my question. Like, how are you going to display the fact that you've been vaccinated? You're going to wear like an armband? Or how are they going to do it? I've seen some pictures, vaccinated against COVID-19. Why don't they just put something on your right hand or your forehead? I mean, it's getting a little bit creepy. This, this kind of thing, how they're going to, are you vaccinated or not? That's getting a little bit weird for me, but we're going to get there. We're going there, and we're going to see what happens, and it's going to be interesting at least. So, yeah.
It will. And just one more point on that, Michael. I think, the human connection, nothing replaces the human connection. You can immediately get a feel for someone, and whether you trust them or not, whether you like what they're saying, and can you imagine? You guys are experienced guys. I'm an experienced guy in the industry with accumulating contacts in this industry for many, many years. But if you're new, if you're a 23-year-old that's just kind of in the industry, trying to build your Rolodex, or that's even an old term, trying to build your contact list and connections, excuse me, a trade show is a great way to do that, or a conference. But now without that, it's got to be harder for someone who's breaking in, especially if it's a customer-facing role, to establish those connections. A lot of us that are experienced can rely upon our existing connections to help us through these rough waters. But it's especially hard, and I think necessary for us to meet new people through these in-person interactions that you mentioned.
But the young people listening to this, Greg, this presents an opportunity for you. Do not get down. Figure out a way to get after it. You know what I mean? Like, let's not say you can't do anything. Hey, say, look, the old way is not available right now, so you got to do something different, Greg Ehrich.
Yeah, and different can be good, as you talked about earlier, but the online conventions, virtual conventions don't work, in my opinion. We can keep trying it, but it's just not our long-term solution there. So we got to get back to in-person in those. All right. Travis Jones from Wesco. There will be an acquisition or divestiture of a major conglomerate. Big words there. That's going to happen, right? More mergers, acquisitions this year, Al?
Yeah, who the heck knows? I mean, that takes a crystal ball, but Travis might know something. He works for a large distributor, Wesco. They just acquired Annixter last year. So who's Wesco buying, guys? Who's it going to be?
Yeah,
true.
He's flexing on the gram with that, but I love it.
Yeah, I like it too. But I don't know how much acquisition activity we'll see, but you can never predict that. It's a tough time to evaluate to put a value on a company right now if their sales are in the toilet. But it'll be fun to see. It happens every year, so we'll see what happens this year.
You had David Nokar from Federated Lighting. It kind of summed up a lot of what we've talked about. I don't think, is there any different point there, Al? You see that than what we've discussed? No. Tina Halfpenny, what did she get into?
Yeah, so Tina is the executive director or CEO of the DLC, Design Lights Consortium, which I think is one of Michael's favorite organizations. And so she's saying that government, municipalities, and building owners will be investing in systems-based approaches to energy optimization. And she adds a lot more comments to that. But recently sat down and interviewed Tina. Very interesting person with some real intelligent perspectives on some of the things. And she even said some things on diversity, which I encourage people to go see in my 5 Big Questions series on Inside Lighting. But as it relates to this, I think when you look at what the DLC is doing, I think the utility rebate programs were a big part of what helped us claw out of the last great recession with, a lot of those commercial projects were drying up. And then a lot of those utility funded rebates allowed us to still drive forward with some high bay sales and troffer sales and other things. So right now, one of the big areas that the DLC is focused on and that's frankly fueling a lot of the growth in the industry is controls. So when she says integrated systems, I think having those systems being driven, and if there's utility partners of the DLC that can start rebating on even more so than they have on some of the basics like occupancy sensors and daylighting, then that would be very exciting to see, because any utility incentive that's out there that appeals to lighting or saving energy is just going to help our industry. So Tina has lots of business partners out there, and she's in an important role. So I'm hoping that her prognostication is an accurate one, because there could be some levers that we could all pull to help us drive forward with some growth in certain areas this year.
She's also in a very tough position. I mean, there's a lot coming at her from different angles and pressure and stuff like that. And, I don't envy her role. Greg, you're on the advisory committee. What's the word over there?
Yeah, very much so. What Al was talking, the controls are they're looking at doing new processes there for the control side. They did talk, and I mentioned that too, Mike, about dark sky too, and looking into that some. So really I think the key that I keep hearing across the calls that I'm on is the push for quality of lighting. Now, what that means is, in everybody's mind, is different, but the idea of that versus just energy efficiency, which is was in the past, I'm on board for. Let's get to good lighting instead of just efficient lighting. That makes sense.
And we save the best for last.
It's only half of an opinion.
I think it's a full good measure opinion. I want to start with the alternate sales channels because I think you're right. I think that as you know, they may not be open about it. They may not, do it up front, but they may just find other ways to sell their products, especially people that have had a rough year and are sitting on a lot of inventory that's still relevant or not like, T-lead tubes with aluminum backed where you can see the diodes or whatever, but like, something made in 2019 or something, and they're sitting on loads. They're going to find other ways to unload that stuff. And I think you're right also about the, economy versions, keeping their production going so they can make more stuff. And yeah, so Al, have you changed anything since you made this prediction? Now, that's what I wonder.
Well, I made this prediction that you're referring to, and yes, I called it a half a prediction because I felt with that other list of VIPs from the industry we had that I wouldn't want to throw myself on that list and put myself on equal footing. So I put a half a prediction there from me personally, added my 2 cents on those two areas that you just touched on, Michael, which impacted the channel prediction as well as some of the adjacent product offerings. So I'll start with the channel. So yeah, I think as mentioned earlier, the larger companies have trouble looking at alternate channels because they're already established and they don't want to disrupt their real big channel partners. But when you look at when this pandemic started, every year for the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm not speaking lighting, just general consumer purchase behavior, online retail was just ticking up like 1% each year for the last 5 or 6 years. So it was growing, but just steady and not huge fast. But then since the pandemic, it's spiked up like 12%, and Amazon is hiring, and logistics companies are dealing with more Amazon products than ever. So I think there's going to be people that have, like you said, maybe they're sitting on excess and obsolete inventory, or just other ways that they can reach the market that will allow them to do that. And just like that, we were talking earlier about trade shows and conferences and in person. The young person who might not have a lot of contacts, they might take to social media, and they might have 1,000-person following or a 20,000 person following, depending on what they do, and they might have virtual friends. So that type of mentality, where someone that doesn't have a history and doesn't have an entrenchment in certain channels, they might be able to do some things online or through other creative means to help drive those products to market. And then one of the things that I mentioned as far as exploring other product categories or adjacent products was, one of them was to create economy versions. So if you have, if you're a high-end manufacturer that's making linear fixtures that are, $100 to $200 a foot, then yeah, it might be time to consider an economy version of that doesn't come as feature rich and is built to order. Maybe it's more assembly friendly, et cetera, or quick ship, et cetera. So, but the other thing as far as adjacent products are concerned is, and we talked earlier about air disinfection being one of those categories, so I won't elaborate on that, but that's definitely one of them. But also one of the growing areas, even in a pandemic, of lighting products is horticulture. So you have companies that are already bending metal, they're already using drivers, they're already buying LEDs, and it's a special science. Just like human-centric lighting, there's lots of science to it, and you get 10 experts in a room, and there's 10 different opinions about how to best apply it. The same is true for horticulture, I think. But that's certainly a growing part of the industry. So it could be that folks, now it takes years sometimes to develop a good, robust product line there, but I would see that with legislation that's enabling the cannabis market, and the larger part of that market though is really this just regular old organic growth of crops, et cetera, that's growing indoors now. I think that's an area that we could see. And then one last example of an adjacent market that's starting to take a trend, this is more in the specification area, is, and we've seen companies from other industries come into lighting, like some large companies or maybe some small companies, like Landscape Forms is a outdoor. They do like architectural benches and other furnishings for outdoor commercial and areas, and they make bollards and other light fixtures, and so we see people come into our space, but I think we're going to see more people maybe going into adjacent spaces. And Focal Point is a good example of this, and Shaper is doing this, and Axis Lighting is doing this as well, where they make acoustic fixtures where you have like a linear fixture or a round fixture or something, and it's padded with acoustic panels, because now we have lots of buildings that don't have the acoustic ceiling, so you just have these open spaces with white noise machines and beams and HVAC duct that's exposed. So the acoustic fixtures help the sound management, so it doesn't bounce around and sound echoey. But now they're also making like acoustic panels that don't have light fixtures attached to them, so you can see companies that are expanding into areas. It's creating revenue. It's matching the Focal Point fixture, but it's a Focal Point acoustic ceiling solution that goes in the conference room that isn't even a light fixture. So I think we'll start seeing those companies expand to create, just get different parts of the project manual from a specifier standpoint. And it's exciting to see this, because I think lighting touches so many things. We see companies like Honeywell that just partnered with some large companies, including Signify Lighting, but on that list was also Microsoft and Oracle. So you see companies like Honeywell and Trane and others that are bringing lighting technologies under one roof as kind of a sole source implementation solution. And I think we could as lighting people see us maybe just taking steps to the left and right to help adjust that and grow the larger market.
Yeah, cannabis is to lighting what pornography is to the internet. It seems like wherever cannabis goes, innovation follows. I always thought, look, everybody I knew who smoked dope had all the dope they needed to smoke. So I didn't know where the growth was. But I mean, they must be selling it to somebody, because like that, people are getting stoned way more because they're making a lot more dope and they're getting better at making it. But I think that the horticultural, it seems a little different. The human-centric or the integrative or circadian whatever crowd is not in agreement with all the manufacturers. Whereas I think the horticultural crowd and the manufacturers have largely come to a consensus on what works and what doesn't. And so I think that that's an example of where human-centric or integrative or circadian, whatever you want to call it, can go, when there's a consensus between manufacturers and researchers and scientists. You talked about a lot of unholy alliances there, Al.
Unholy?
Yeah, like companies you would never think would work together are working together. That's a little bit weird.
Well, I think isn't our industry, our industry has a lot of those examples over the years. I mean, you look at even back to the old fluorescent days, if we can recall those, when you had ballast companies competing with fixture companies but still selling to them, and controls companies buying from competitors and selling to competitors, and like a company like Leviton sells to a lot of lighting manufacturers, but they also compete with some of the lighting brands that Leviton owns. So I think there's in the Philips brands and other things. So there's lots of examples of that already. So it's just kind of a situation that's been fairly common, in my opinion, throughout the lighting industry. But what I do think is an interesting sweet spot that we could see, and Lutron's been leveraging this for years, is back in the day when you had fluorescent dimming ballasts, you recommend the fluorescent dimmer by the same company to go with the fluorescent dimming ballast for compatibility reasons. But now you see lighting companies, they're creating their own control systems, their own controls products. It might operate on an open source type protocol where you don't need to have a brand X fixture talking to a brand X control system. But I think companies will try to leverage that all-in-one solution to get the to get the expansion sale, so that if you're doing phase one of a project and it's all brand X, then phase two will be that same brand, because you want the control system compatibility to be smooth and continuous throughout there. So I think that's one part that we might see there, as far as some of those different product components that are all funneling under the same roof.
Well, he's been using brand X, and I think the key word you put is might, and I like that word. It might not. We're going to see. 2021's coming, Al. Thank you for being a guest, my man.
Guys, always love being with you. Thanks for having me.
Keystone Technologies. KEYSTONETECH.com. GreggyKeystoneTech.com.
backlit flat panels, thin and lightweight. And when I say lightweight, I mean it's light. It's like lighter than the box it came out of. I had one today. I opened it up and
Did you spin it on your finger?
Fixture. I could have, like a pizza or whatever. The fixture was lighter than the cardboard box, and I'm not joking about that.
Woo.
So it's lightweight. It also provides good light, nice, even, uniform light. It's backlit, and it's got power selectable, meaning different wattages and lumens, and different Kelvin temps right on the fixture itself, and 4 knockouts.
Come on.
You know, some of these clowns put in 1 knockout and expect that all fixtures mount that way. You need multiple options when you have knockouts.
Yeah,
Be
you
smart.
need lots of knockouts. Sometimes the electrician runs out of the double knockout connector. He's got Jay-Z chain those. Come on, man. Get a grip.
That's right.
Go to KeystoneTech.com. That's I haven't said get a grip on the show in a long time, man. Go to KeystoneTech.com. And of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. That's NAILD.org, baby. Nailed.org. Time to get associated, Greg.
I'm in. I am. I'll continue to be. You too.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, Al, thanks for coming on the show. We love your website, inside.lighting. Yeah, man. He's one of the newsmakers or the news posters, or I don't know what you want to call him, but he's got a heck of a website there, man.
Written on the rectory wall, there's a sign there for all. You are lost, Lord is there to find you.